The log begins, as all things must, with a reminder of my infinite patience. Our superiors, in their shimmering wisdom, assign me the tedious duty of cataloging the behaviors of a local bipedal life form from an insignificant blue-green planet. Humans, as they call themselves, are small, noisy creatures, forever occupied with absurd rituals. One could almost admire their persistence if it were not such a chore to endure. From orbit, their civilization presents itself less as an advanced society and more as a cosmic accident. Their atmosphere is smeared with carbon emissions, their cities glow like open sores, and their oceans are laced with plastic that will outlast their species. And yet, somehow they endure. We selected Earth not because it is remarkable, but because it is laughably unremarkable. For study, it is perfect. Primitive beings are predictable, and predictability is comforting. Their cultures revolve around consumption and distraction. I discovered what they call television, a medium of glowing panels where humans sit, motionless, absorbing images of other humans screaming at one another over mating disputes or food competitions. They call this reality, though nothing about it bears resemblance to survival. Our entire research vessel howled in laughter when we encountered a broadcast labeled Florida Man. At first, we believed this Florida Man was a single experimental subject, unstable, perhaps a rogue outlier. Then the archives revealed he was merely one among billions, each equally capable of recklessness. In another archive, I studied their nutritional rituals. The microwave burrito, for example, is a cylinder of processed matter heated by radiation. Its consumers boast of speed and convenience, though ingestion often results in indigestion. This, too, is treated as entertainment. Truly, humans confuse suffering for joy. They also created emojis, tiny pictorial glyphs used in place of complex language. Imagine an entire civilization reduced to smiling yellow spheres to indicate their emotional spectrum. One wonders how such a society navigates diplomacy without misunderstanding erupting every moment. My crew shares my opinion. The species is primitive and unthreatening. Yet our orders remain. Retrieve one live specimen for analysis. Our task is not to conquer, merely to study. And so we observed. We watched them stumble through their days with limited senses. Their eyes are poorly adapted, vulnerable to the dark. Their ears capture only narrow frequencies. Their sense of smell is nearly vestigial. How such flawed beings came to dominate their planet is an enigma. The working hypothesis is luck, evolution's dice roll. Nevertheless, procedure demands rigor. We scan continents for an ideal subject. Isolated, unarmed, unlikely to be missed. The forested regions of their northern hemisphere offered fertile hunting grounds. There, humans still practice rituals they call camping, deliberately removing themselves from shelters to dwell in temporary cloth structures. We found one, a lone male, approximately mid-30s, seated by a riverbank. He wore simple coverings, carried primitive tools, and tended to a fire as though it were divine. He neither sang nor shouted as many humans do. Instead, he sat in silence, staring into flames, occasionally sipping from a metal container. Docile, solitary, and, most importantly, defenseless. Preparation for abduction proceeded smoothly. Our paralysis beam is effective against far larger predators, and we anticipated little resistance. We descended cloaked, adjusted the beam's frequency, and swept it over his figure. His body stiffened instantly, muscles frozen, cup falling harmlessly into the soil. The fire crackled on, indifferent. We transported him aboard without incident, laying him on the restraint cradle. My subordinates exchanged dismissive remarks. Too easy, they said. A species of soft prey. I permitted myself a laugh. During transit, I considered what we might learn. His blood composition, neural mapping, reproductive peculiarities. Already, I was drafting reports comparing human indulgence in chemical stimulants, caffeine, alcohol, nicotine, to the complex symbiosis of higher galactic species. Imagine binding one's life to beans and leaves, plants ground into powders, inhaled or swallowed for temporary vigor. Their entire civilization, I concluded, balances upon a knife's edge of stimulants. Remove coffee, and the species may collapse overnight. Yet as we drifted between stars, a minor anomaly occurred. It was subtle, easily dismissed. While reviewing the stasis pod, I noted that his eyelids trembled, opening by the slightest fraction. A flicker, no more. The others laughed when I mentioned it. Reflex, they said. Muscular spasms are common under paralysis. But the sensation clung to me like static across the mind. For a fraction of fraction, I thought his gaze met mine. Calm, observant, not struggling, not panicked, as though he were waiting. I dismissed the notion, of course. Pride demands it. After all, our superiority is evident. Their species is still mystified by the mechanics of combustion engines. They believe their satellites grant them vision of the cosmos, yet their sensors barely reach beyond their sun. A people addicted to cats. Yes, cats. I nearly forgot this most bewildering element. They revere these furry quadrupeds, sharing endless recordings of them leaping, falling, or glaring. They assign them near-divine status. My crew theorizes cats are in fact their ruling class, and humans merely servants. The theory is not entirely unserious. The man in the cradle remained motionless. His chest rose and fell with steady rhythm. I documented his condition, adjusted the restraints, and prepared for formal interrogation once we arrived at orbit. His expression was neutral, almost serene. I found myself wondering what sort of dreams a human entertains. Do they dream of chasing cats, of consuming burritos, of endless flickering panels where Florida man reigns eternal? Or do they dream of conquest, as we once did, countless cycles ago? No matter, he would be dissected, not literally, though some among us advocated for such barbarism, but methodically. Neural scans, psychological probing, genetic sequencing. We would uncover the mysteries of human adaptation and file them neatly into our archives. Another primitive cataloged. Another reminder of our supremacy. Still, I replay that moment in my thoughts. The half-flicker of an eye, the suggestion of awareness behind a frozen face. It was nothing, surely. A trick of light, or my imagination overreaching after too many hours in orbit. Yet when I turned away from the cradle, I could not resist a final glance. His eyes were closed again, sealed tight. But I tell myself, though I cannot prove it, that the faintest curl touched the corner of his lips, a shadow of a smile. And if it was indeed a smile, then it was not the smile of prey. It was something else, something that suggested knowledge I would rather believe impossible. I logged the anomaly, though I marked it as trivial. Protocol demands honesty even when honesty disturbs. We are returning soon to our base of operations, where the real work will begin. My confidence remains unshaken. After all, this is but one man, one solitary human, removed from his campfire and his primitive rituals. He is a lone specimen against an empire of knowledge and technology. What could he possibly do? Yet in the back of my mind, like an itch I cannot scratch, I feel as though I'm no longer the one conducting the study. The restraints hummed softly, holding the human body in perfect suspension. Our instruments declared him unconscious, his neural pathways subdued, his muscles immobilized. I prepared the chamber for preliminary questioning, a procedure designed less to extract information and more to observe behavior. My assistants busied themselves with calibrations, all eager to prod at this specimen as though he were an insect pinned to a board. Confidence, after all, had not yet abandoned us. Then, without warning, the man's eyelids parted. Slowly, steadily, with none of the frantic confusion one would expect from prey, he looked at us. His gaze drifted across the chamber, registering every console, every monitor, every movement of our limbs. When his eyes settled on me, there was no fear. Instead, he smiled. The chamber stilled. My technicians exchanged uneasy glances, though I maintained composure. "You are not meant to be conscious," I remarked, my voice firm. Remain calm. You are under control. It was meant to reassure, but the man chuckled, as if I had delivered a clumsy joke. You're the commander, he said evenly, nodding toward me. That one's your medic. And him, he pointed with his chin at my assistant. He's the one who touches buttons without reading labels. My crew bristled. Accuracy should have been impossible, yet each designation was correct. I stiffened, demanding, explain how you deduce this. He shrugged, as though the answer were obvious. Posture, eye contact, the way you stand apart from them. I've seen enough teams to know who pulls rank. He paused, his smile widening. You'd be surprised what a man notices when everyone thinks he's asleep. The words lingered like smoke. My assistants whispered, unsure if their ears deceived them. The human's tone was not frantic or pleading. It was instructional, as though he were cataloging us in return. I noted the detail in my log, even as irritation curled in my chest. We control the pace, I told him sharply. You're the subject. You answer what we ask. Fair enough, he replied, settling deeper against the restraints as though he were reclining in a chair. Go ahead. The insolence was staggering, yet procedure demanded we continue. We began with simple inquiries: name, origin, social rank. He provided answers, though each was accompanied by asides that unsettled us further. When asked about his homeland, he mused about borders and wars, comparing nations to rival packs of dogs. When pressed on his occupation, he smiled slyly. Security, he said, offering no elaboration, as if daring us to pry deeper. At one point, he tilted his head toward a ceiling-mounted surveillance orb. That one's blind on the left side, he murmured. My technician stiffened, glancing at the console to confirm. The human was correct. A flaw in the monitoring system we had overlooked for cycles had been identified within minutes of his awakening. Coincidence, I declared, though even I felt the hollowness of the word. The man ignored my tone. Instead, he examined us with a casual authority that grated at my nerves. When asked how he felt, he said, like I'd been on a red-eye flight, minus the peanuts. None of us understood, though the way he chuckled afterward suggested the remark carried menace cloaked in humor. We attempted neural stimulation, intending to chart brainwave responses. The readings, however, produced anomalies. Instead of panic, his cortical activity reflected anticipation, patterns consistent with calculation rather than fear. Our medic grew visibly unsettled. It is as though he is running simulations, she whispered. The man overheard. Good guess, he said softly. I've been awake since you lifted me off the ground. You're not nearly as quiet as you think you are. This claim, absurd as it seemed, sent ripples through the chamber. He should have been insensate, yet he described with precision the angle of our descent, the hum of our cloaking field, even the faint, acrid smell of our coolant. Each detail was accurate. One assistant blurted, "That is impossible." The man's eyes gleamed. Impossible's a word people use right before they get surprised. I reminded myself of discipline. He was only human, bound, surrounded, utterly at our mercy. Yet his calmness gnawed at the edges of certainty. To dispel it, I asked pointedly, what is the source of your confidence? Do you not grasp the severity of your position? He leaned forward slightly, as far as the restraints allowed. I know exactly where I am. I know what you're trying to do. And I know you underestimate me. That's enough. The silence that followed was unbearable. My crew shuffled, their once boastful demeanor collapsing into discomfort. To regain control, I ordered a shift in questioning, pressing him for details about human military capacity. He answered obliquely, offering quips that seemed nonsensical yet carried the weight of hidden truths. When asked to name a leader of great power, he simply smirked and said, Chuck Norris. The name meant nothing to us, yet his delivery, calm and deliberate, suggested significance. My technicians searched databases, but found only references to dramatizations of combat, legendary feats exaggerated for amusement. And yet the man winked as he spoke it, leaving us deeply unsettled. He continued weaving humor into his responses, each phrase eroding the illusion of dominance. Asked about survival instincts, he remarked, "We've got duct tape. That solves 90% of problems." When my assistant frowned in confusion, the man laughed softly, as though the joke was on us. Even in laughter, his eyes moved with precision. He cataloged every screen, every shadow, every tool within reach. He was not trapped. He was studying. I felt the weight of reversal settling upon me, though I dared not admit it aloud. We concluded the session prematurely, feigning authority while concealing unease. As systems powered down, I observed him one last time. He had closed his eyes again, but the expression on his face was unmistakable. That same quiet smile. I recorded the log entry with forced attachment, noting anomalies for future review. Yet within myself, I could not silence the question taking shape. Had we brought a specimen aboard? Or had we invited something else entirely? And as the chamber doors sealed, I caught the faintest murmur from the restrained figure, his voice drifting through the quiet. I've already seen enough. The words were not loud. They were not even meant for us, perhaps, but they landed with the weight of inevitability, echoing long after we departed the room. The chamber lights brightened, signaling the transition into diagnostic testing. I instructed the team to prepare the cerebral scanners, confident that data would expose the man's bravado as nothing more than mammalian posturing. With meticulous care, we lowered the prismatic array over his head, beams piercing flesh and bone to chart the synaptic labyrinth beneath. The machine hummed, its panels flooding with glyphs of thought patterns, reflex arcs, and neural resonance. At first, everything seemed ordinary. Slower reaction time in our kind, narrower sensory bands, limited regenerative capability. But then the anomalies emerged. His brainwave spiked, not during stress, but during silence. Calculations spiraled across the screen like storm currents, organized yet unpredictable. One of my technicians adjusted calibration, assuming error. Another ran a cross-check. The results held. This human's cognition operated at a level inconsistent with the species. Pattern recognition off the scale. Adaptive problem-solving indistinguishable from predictive modeling. It was as if his mind were rehearsing outcomes faster than we could observe. I masked my unease. Machines misfire. Rerun the scan. We reran it 3 times. Each iteration returned the same conclusion. The man was no passive subject. He was, at minimum, preparing for something. He opened his eyes mid-procedure, breaking the illusion of unconsciousness. "You'll drive yourselves crazy with those readings," he remarked. "Brains don't like being measured, especially mine." My assistant recoiled. He should not even be aware of the scan. The man smiled faintly. "I've been aware the whole time." The words drew a silence, so dense I could feel its weight pressing against my carapace. I attempted to regain control. "Explain how you can perceive what should be imperceptible." "Simple," he said, turning his head slightly toward one of the scanners. "Your beams are diagnostic, but they leak. I can feel the heat signature. Not pain, more like a whisper. You notice it too if you spent long nights waiting in forests, listening for things you couldn't see." The remark unsettled me more than I dared reveal. For here was a truth I had mocked earlier. Humans and their fragile eyesight, their limited spectrum. Yet this one described a way of perceiving outside our projections. We proceeded with psychological probing, projecting illusions into his mind to observe response. He dispelled each scenario with disarming ease. When shown a simulation of drowning, he chuckled. "Spent summers on a swim team," he said. When confronted with fire, he leaned toward the flames as though savoring warmth. When tested with isolation, he quipped, "Try reality television. It's worse." His resilience grated at my authority, so I demanded bluntly, "What is your profession?" No evasions. He met my gaze steadily. I was military, long-range reconnaissance. Later, security testing. Red teaming, we called it. I was paid to break into systems and show people how vulnerable they were. The implications rattled my technicians. They whispered uneasily, recalling his earlier deductions about our equipment. If true, he was not just a soldier but a strategist, trained to infiltrate and expose weaknesses. I scoffed to maintain appearances. "You admit this freely? You expect us to believe Earth trains its primitives in such disciplines?" He tilted his head, that smile never leaving his face. You'd be surprised what Earth trains for. Weakness is an excellent camouflage. We let people think we're distracted, primitive, soft. It's the oldest trick in the book. Hide teeth behind a smile. One of my officers muttered, "He is bluffing." The human laughed softly. That's the other trick. You never know if we are. The scanners flared again, recording neurological spikes not consistent with deception, but with certainty. He was telling the truth, or at least believe it fully. I felt the first cold edge of doubt. Our medic leaned closer to the readout. "Commander, his cognitive profile is not linear. It doesn't plateau where expected. It adapts mid-test. Machines misfire." I repeated, though my voice cracked slightly. The human interrupted my denial. "Machines don't misfire. People misinterpret. You're measuring something you didn't expect, so you assume it's error. That's on you, not the tool." The audacity of his words silenced the chamber. No captive should speak this way. Yet he sounded like an instructor chastising students. The power dynamic I had cherished felt inverted, as though he were guiding us down a path of his own design. I sought to reassert dominance. "Enough riddles. If you are so clever, why remain bound? Why tolerate captivity?" His eyes narrowed, gleaming in the sterile light. "Because I'm not the one under test. You are." The declaration was absurd, yet the chill it carried was undeniable. My technicians shifted uncomfortably. The medic whispered a phrase I wish she had not. "What if he is right?" I barked at them to focus. Still, the man's words lodged like barbs. I pressed forward, desperate to shatter his composure. "You sit there restrained, surrounded by forces you cannot match. What possible leverage do you believe you have?" He leaned forward, muscles taut against the restraints. His voice dropped to a near whisper. "I've already sent a message." The chamber erupted in chaos. My officers argued over comms, demanding verification. No signals had been recorded leaving the ship, yet his certainty was unshakable. I ordered immediate scans of outbound transmissions, triple-layer sweeps across frequencies. Nothing but static. Still, he smiled. "You won't find it. Not in the way you're looking." Fear rippled through my crew. Some demanded sedation. Others argued sedation would be meaningless if he had already acted. I tried to restore order, insisting this was psychological warfare. But then the ship itself betrayed me. The lights dimmed for a fraction of a second, a flicker barely perceptible. Consoles reset, glyphs fluttering before realigning. A trivial malfunction, easily ignored. Yet the timing was too precise, too convenient. "He's interfering," the medic whispered. "Impossible." I snapped, though my voice was brittle. "He has no access." The man closed his eyes, resting calmly against the cradle as though finished with us. "You scan me. You should know by now. I always find access." I ended the session abruptly, storming from the chamber to conceal my unease. Yet even as the door sealed, his final words followed me like a curse. "You thought I was the subject, but I've been running the experiment." The corridor felt colder than before. Each step echoed with doubt. My pride insisted he bluffed, but deep within, I feared the truth. Something had shifted, unseen yet undeniable. And when the lights flickered again, longer this time, my fear sharpened into certainty. The command deck should have been a sanctuary of control, a place where every panel and display bent to my will. Instead, it quivered with unease. Screens flickered without command, doors sealed and unsealed in irregular rhythms, and the hum of the ship's core shifted like a breath caught between fear and revelation. My crew scrambled across the consoles, voices sharp with panic as systems rejected their input. I stood at the center, demanding order, though even my own words felt brittle in the chaos. "It is a malfunction," I declared, raising my voice above theirs. "Circuits fluctuate, nothing more." But then the lights dimmed fully, plunging us into darkness so complete that even our enhanced vision faltered. For a long breath, only silence lived within the ship. Then, in that blackness, a voice rose through the intercom, steady and unhurried. "You rely too much on your machines," the human said. "That's always dangerous. Every member of the crew froze. I felt my chest tighten, the arrogance that once shielded me beginning to crack. He has no access, I whispered to myself, though the words carried no conviction. Consoles sputtered back to life, but not with our interface. The screens now displayed human glyphs, symbols of their crude alphabet scrolling across in perfect synchrony. My technicians wailed, hands trembling as they tried to override. Nothing responded. Instead, one phrase repeated across every screen. "We see you." "He is weaponizing the diagnostic systems," one officer cried. "He mapped the ship through our own scans." I wanted to deny it, to cling to superiority, yet the explanation carried a logic I could not refute. The same beams designed to probe his physiology had become windows through which he studied us. He had used our tools not as chains, but as keys. I ordered containment, but even as I spoke, bulkhead doors slammed down across corridors, locking half my crew away from stations. Emergency power rerouted to isolated sectors we did not command. Each attempt to seize control slipped further from our grasp, as if the ship itself had betrayed us. The human remained bound in the restraint cradle, yet his influence stretched across every circuit. It was as if the vessel now bent around him, acknowledging a new master. I opened comms to his chamber. "What do you intend?" I demanded, my voice trembling despite my effort to steady it. His reply came calmly, almost kindly. "Not much. Just teaching you a lesson. You're too comfortable in the light. You forget predators don't announce themselves." I clenched my mandibles, fury and dread battling within me. "You speak as though you are more than a man. You are only one." "One is enough," he answered. My officers whispered about cutting power to the chamber, severing his life support, ending the anomaly. Yet before I could decide, the ship itself rejected the idea. Life support rerouted to redundant channels, bypassing our commands. Every measure we took collapsed under countermeasures we did not design. He spoke again, his voice echoing calmly through every speaker. "You think Earth is weak. That's fine. We like it that way. Weakness is camouflage. We hide our claws until you're close enough to bleed." The words chilled me, for they echoed the lessons of our own ancestors, predators who stalked in shadow until prey surrendered. To hear them from human was to see a mirror I did not wish to face. Then came the revelation that stripped away the last of my arrogance. He spoke not only of himself, but of his world. "We've watched the skies longer than you think. Cloaked satellites, deep space monitors, networks you'd overlook because you assumed we couldn't build them. We've been pretending." At once, our long-range sensor screamed with alarms. New signatures bloomed across the void. Ships, hundreds, perhaps thousands, materializing from behind, cloaking fields we had dismissed as fantasy. They moved with precision, surrounding us in silence, their presence undeniable. My officers collapsed into despair. "The Earth has a fleet," one muttered, voice quivering. "A hidden fleet." I stared at the readings, my mind unraveling. For generations, we mocked them as primitives, drunk on burritos and distracted by cats. Yet here was proof that their supposed chaos was theater, a stage mask concealing strategy of terrifying scope. The human continued, his tone steady, almost merciful. "You thought we hunted in the light, but our eyes were made for the dark." The words hung like a blade above us, final and undeniable. I felt the chamber around me shrink, my authority dissolving into irrelevance. No matter how I commanded, no matter how I ordered, the truth could not be undone. We were not the hunters. We were the prey who had wandered willingly into the snare. Still, a fragment of pride clawed within me. If Earth is so powerful, why allow capture? Why let us take you at all? He paused, and I imagined the faint curl of that unsettling smile. Because sometimes the best way to learn about your enemy is to let them think they've won. You studied me. I studied you. Now the game ends. And with those words, the ship's power surrendered entirely. Darkness consumed us, absolute and merciless. Only his voice remained, calm and unshaken. "Don't worry. We're not monsters. We won't destroy you. But we will remember who underestimated us. I stood trembling, stripped of arrogance, stripped of certainty. Around me, my crew whispered prayers to stars that could no longer hear us. For the first time in my long existence, I understood humility, and it burned worse than any wound. When light returned, it was not from our ship, but from the armada outside. Human vessels, sleek, sharp, cloaked in shadows, surrounded us like wolves circling prey. Their silence was louder than any weapon. I recorded my final log with hands that would not still. Once I laughed at this species. Once, I believed their distractions made them harmless. Now I see the truth. The laughter was camouflage. The weakness was deliberate. And we are the punchline of a joke that ends in dread. If I survive to report, I will tell the council what I have seen. That Earth is not to be mocked, not to be toyed with, not to be measured by the clumsy standards of empires grown lazy in their light. For in the darkness, the human smiles, and when he smiles, the void itself listens. I do not know what they will do with us or what fate awaits. But I know this. I will never again underestimate the eyes of a creature who hunts not in brightness, but in shadow.